Viscera splattered the once pristine walls of the laboratory as the afflicted Triant convulsed, succumbing to the Crimson Death's merciless onslaught. Dr. Korvac, his appendages trembling with exhaustion and despair, stared at the lifeless husk that had been his research subject mere moments ago. Another failure, another life lost to the insidious plague that liquefied organs and extinguished entire civilizations with horrifying efficiency. Just as all seemed lost, a small human vessel careened from the sky, trailing smoke and flames as it crash-landed near the research facility. The sole survivor, Dr. Richard Bailey, was rushed to Korvac's lab for emergency treatment. A renegade epidemiologist, Bailey had been studying the plague's transmission vectors on the fringes of Triant space before his ship was damaged, fleeing a corporate patrol. As Korvac tended to Bailey's injuries, a glimmer of hope emerged from their shared findings. The human doctor had identified the contagion's spreading mechanisms, while Korvac had pinpointed a genetic weakness to exploit. If they could combine their research, a cure was within reach, but only if they could outmaneuver the corporate enforcers closing in, determined to bury the truth and maintain their iron grip on the galaxy. The acrid stench of melted polymers assaulted Dr. Korvac's nostrils as he gunned the makeshift hovercraft across the barren wastes of Zephyria. Beside him, Dr. Bailey clutched a salvaged pulse rifle, his knuckles bone-white against the weapon's grimy stock. The cryopod containing Korvac's stricken bondmate hummed in the rear compartment, a fragile beacon of hope amidst the chaos. "There!" Korvac shouted over the din, indicating a narrow opening in the looming canyon walls ahead. He wrenched the controls, sending the hovercraft careening into the labyrinthine passage. The Metacorp vehicles thundered after them, their bulk scraping against the jagged rock. Korvac wove through the twisting canyon, his heart's hammering against his thoracic ridge. The hovercraft dipped and swayed, narrowly avoiding the grasping tendrils of a carnivorous cave vine. Bailey fired at the Metacorp pursuers, the pulse rifle's amber bolts ricocheting off the canyon walls in a dazzling display. Emerging from the canyon's far side, they sped towards a cluster of rusted structures jutting from the wasteland, an abandoned mining complex that housed Korvac's hidden secondary lab. The hovercraft skidded to a halt inside a cavernous loading bay, kicking up clouds of ancient dust. Korvac leapt from the vehicle, his lab coat flapping as he rushed to check on his bondmate. The cryopod's vital monitors pulsed with reassuring regularity. Bailey joined him, eyeing their surroundings warily. Korvac nodded grimly, his crest flaring with dedication. "Then we'd best get to work. We've got enough for a few days, maybe a week if we stretch it," Bailey assessed, his voice tight. "Not nearly enough to synthesize a cure." "Then we'll make do with what we have," Korvac replied, his eyes never leaving his mate's pallid face behind the stasis field. Bailey moved to the lab's antiquated comms array, his fingers flying over the corroded keypad. The screen sputtered to life, revealing a roguish human face etched with concern. "Not yet, Misha, but we need your help." Bailey quickly outlined their situation and their need for additional equipment from his downed ship. Volkov ran a hand through his shaggy mane, considering. "I'll do what I can, but it won't be easy. Metacorp's got bounty hunters crawling all over that wreck." The screen went dark, and Bailey turned to find Korvac already setting up their makeshift lab, his movements precise and focused. The human doctor rolled up his sleeves and joined his alien counterpart, their shared purpose driving them forward against the gathering storm. The abandoned mining complex echoed with the whir of ancient machinery as Korvac and Bailey toiled over their makeshift equipment. Days blurred together in a haze of fevered research and desperate hope. Then, as the last dregs of their supplies dwindled, a familiar voice crackled over the comms. "I've got your gear, but we need to move fast." Misha Volkov's gruff tone carried an edge of urgency. Metacorp's tightening the noose. Korvac's crest flared with perseverance as he locked eyes with Bailey. "It's time." They loaded the stasis pod containing Korvac's bondmate onto Volkov's battered freighter, the human's piloting skills put to the test as they evaded corporate patrols. Volkov's fingers danced across the control panel, forging credentials with preternatural speed. "These should get us into the distribution hub on Nexus Prime," he muttered, eyes never leaving the screens. But they won't hold up under heavy scrutiny. The cavernous warehouse of Nexus Prime's main distribution center loomed before them, a labyrinth of towering shelves and automated systems. Korvac and Bailey, clad in stolen maintenance uniforms, slipped through the shadows. EMP charges clinked softly in their pockets. Bailey planted the charge, his hands steady despite the stakes. Korvac watched the corridors, every nerve crackling with tension. One by one, they disabled the hub's defenses, creeping ever closer to their target, an automated supply ship primed for launch. They reached the vessel just as alarms shattered the eerie quiet. Red emergency lights bathed the loading bay in a hellish glow as Metacorp enforcers poured in, plasma bolts sizzling through the air. Korvac raced up the gangplank, the acrid stench of ozone filling his nostrils. The ship's bioprinter interface swam before his eyes as his fingers flew across the controls, uploading the precious cure protocol. A searing pain lanced through his shoulder as a stray shot found its mark. "It's done," he called out, fighting through waves of agony. Bailey appeared in the hatchway, shoving Korvac to safety as a point-blank plasma burst slammed into the human's chest. The doctor's armor smoked and cracked, but held. Korvac dragged his wounded comrade into the hold as the ship's engines roared to life. They burst free of the station in a hail of weapons fire, Volkov's piloting, weaving them through the asteroid belt with terrifying precision. In the cargo hold, Korvac tended to Bailey's burns, the smell of charred flesh mixing with the sterile air of the ship. "Did I ever tell you about the French resistance?" Bailey mumbled through gritted teeth. "Ordinary people standing up to tyranny, even when the odds seemed impossible." As they reached the swirling miasma of the Valtari Nebula, a coded transmission cut through the static. General Zorax Primax's face appeared on the screen, his expression grim. Korvac's hearts clenched as the full weight of their situation settled upon him. He looked at Bailey, battered but unbowed, then to Volkov, fingers already dancing across the ship's controls. As the automated systems began churning out doses of the cure, Korvac knew that this was only the beginning. "We need to get word out," he said, his voice steady despite the fear threatening to overwhelm him. "Every subjugated race, every oppressed world, they need to know there's hope." Bailey nodded, a fierce light in his eyes. "We give them the cure, and we give them a chance to fight back." The Valtari Nebula's swirling cosmic gases cast an ethereal glow across the hijacked Metacorp supply ship's hull. Inside, the automated systems hummed ceaselessly, churning out vial after vial of the precious Crimson Death cure. "Another uprising on Nexus 9, Bailey reported, his voice hoarse from days of endless work. "The colonists overwhelmed the corporate garrison and seized control of the spaceport." Korvac nodded, a flicker of hope igniting in his weary eyes. "And Metacorp's response?" "Stretched thin," Bailey replied, a grim smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "General Primax's fleet has them dancing to his tune." As if summoned by the mention of his name, the grizzled Iconian's face materialized on the main view screen. Behind him, the bridge of his flagship crackled with nearly unleashed chaos. "Bombardments intensified," Primax growled. "Thousands huddled in makeshift shelters. They won't last much longer without intervention." Bailey's mind focused. Then that's where we're headed next. As they broke atmosphere, the true scale of devastation became apparent. Cities lay in smoldering ruins, the air thick with ash and the acrid stench of burning polymers. Korvac and Bailey donned environment suits, their packs laden with precious vials of the cure. "We can't save them all," Bailey murmured, his voice tight with barely suppressed emotion. They moved through the makeshift ward, administering the cure with practiced efficiency. Each dose was a small victory against the ravages of the Crimson Death. Ferungi with liquefying organs stabilized. Triant younglings ceased their pained convulsions. A thunderous explosion rocked the trauma center. Through the haze of smoke and debris, the menacing silhouettes of Metacorp pacification units loomed. "We've got to move," Volkov's voice crackled over the comms. "I can't hold this position much longer." As they broke orbit, encrypted transmissions flooded their comms. The success of the cure had galvanized disparate rebel groups into a unified force, the Liberat Unity. Across a dozen worlds, Metacorp's iron grip began to slip. Korvac allowed himself a moment of cautious optimism. Perhaps the tide is finally turning. Bailey nodded, his eyes fixed on the swirling star field beyond the viewport. Let's hope it's not too late. Volkov's fingers danced across the nav computer. 12 hours at maximum burn, but we'll be flying straight into the lion's den. As they dropped out of FTL, a Vernum station loomed before them, a titanic construct of gleaming metal and pulsing energy fields. Surrounding it was a ragtag armada, united in purpose, if not appearance. General Primax's face filled the view screen, his crest rippling with scarcely controlled fury. Doctors, I've brought everything we could muster. Are you certain about this plan? All ships engage, Primax roared. With a bone-jarring impact, they crashed into one of Avernum's docking bays. Korvac grabbed the canister containing the airborne cure and staggered down the ramp. Alarms wailed as pressurized atmosphere vented into space. It's done, he breathed, releasing the cure into Avernum's recyclers. Bailey clasped his shoulder. Now We've secured the main concourse, he growled, but Metacorps called in their reserves. We need to push for the central nexus. They battled through wave after wave of corporate forces. The effects of the cure were already apparent. Many of Metacorp's augmented troops staggered and fell, their enhanced physiology rebelling against them. A titanic explosion shook the station. Through a shattered viewport, Korvac saw a massive Iconian dreadnought cleaved in two by Avernum's main cannon. We're running out of time, Bailey panted. Fall back, Primax bellowed. Concentrate fire on their neural clusters. Bailey, he shouted into his comm. We need to reach the override controls. Through the din of battle, he heard the human's strained reply. Little busy here. A deafening roar filled the air as Kryn hurled Bailey across the room. The CEO advanced on Korvac, cybernetic limbs reconfiguring into vicious weaponry. You've lost, Doctor, Kryn snarled. This station will be your tomb. With a final Herculean effort, Korvac input the last override sequence. The impactor countdown froze, then winked out entirely. Is it over? The human asked. No, Korvac whispered. It's only the beginning. What's happening? He shouted over the cacophony. Korvac's fingers flew across the control panel, his eyes widening in horror. Cascade failure in the reactor core. The station's tearing itself apart. General Primax barked orders into his comm unit, coordinating a frantic evacuation. Chaos erupted as soldiers and survivors alike scrambled for escape pods and docked ships. They sprinted through collapsing corridors, dodging falling debris and electrical fires. A deafening roar filled the air as the station's superstructure buckled. Bailey felt the floor give way beneath his feet, plummeting into darkness. Easy, Doctor, she chittered. I'm Vila. You've been unconscious for 3 days. Bailey tried to sit up, wincing at the pain that lanced through his body. Where am I? General Primax's flagship, Vila replied, gently easing him back down. We barely made it off of Vernum before it imploded. The door hissed open, admitting Primax himself. The Iconian's crest was flattened against his skull, a clear sign of distress. Dr. Bailey, he rumbled, we have a situation. Bailey's blood ran cold as Primax explained. A neutron cascade primed to sterilize all life in the galaxy. The ultimate act of corporate spite. Vahila stepped forward. There is. An isomeric compound in Hadrana's planetary core. It's the only thing that can neutralize the cascade. Bailey met her gaze, seeing the commitment there. When do we leave? The surface of Hadrana Forsern was a hellscape of boiling sulfur lakes and rivers of molten rock. Their armored crawler inched forward, battered by gale-force winds laden with razor-sharp volcanic glass. Shield integrity at 60%, Vila shouted from her station. We can't take much more of this. A massive tremor rocked the vehicle. Warning klaxons blared as systems failed in cascade. Bailey felt the sickening lurch as the crawler toppled, tumbling down a steep incline before coming to rest in a field of cooling lava. Days blurred together as they navigated treacherous terrain. Bailey's muscles screamed with each step, his lungs burning despite the suit's filters. Vila's steady presence kept him going. her quiet drive a beacon in the inferno. They reached the core access point to find Metacorp's vanguard already there. Augmented shock troopers guarded scientists harvesting the precious isomeric compound. "We're too late," one of the Iconians hissed. Bailey shook his head. "No, we end this here." A scream of pain cut through the din. Bailey turned to see Vila crumple, her suit breached by multiple hits. "No!" he roared, rushing to her side. Her multifaceted eyes flickered, life ebbing away. "Finish it," she whispered, pressing a vial into his hand. "Save them all." Metacorp's forces scattered, their augmentations failing under the onslaught. Bailey activated his wrist comlink, broadcasting the isomeric frequency across all subspace channels. As Primax's fleet arrived to mop up the remnants of Metacorp's last stand, Bailey stood alone amidst the devastation. The neutron cascade had been halted, the galaxy saved. Weeks passed in a blur of debriefings, medical treatments, and strategy sessions. Bailey found himself thrust into the center of a new conflict, one fought with words and ideology rather than plasma rifles and antimatter bombs. He stood before the interim governing council, led by General Primax. The Iconian's crest rippled with scarcely controlled impatience as Bailey outlined his vision for a democratic rebuilding process. "We need to give power back to the people," Bailey argued, his voice hoarse from hours of debate. "A representative system with checks and balances to prevent any one group from—" Primax's fist slammed onto the table. "Enough! Your human ideals have no place here, Doctor. The old ways brought stability and order. We will reinstate the hereditary hierarchies, as is our right and tradition." Bailey opened his mouth to retort, but a commotion outside the chamber cut him off. The doors burst open, admitting a group of battered civilians. Their spokesperson, a lanky Auralian with iridescent scales, stepped forward. "I am Selah Virate of the Interstellar Aid Cooperative," she announced, her melodic voice tinged with urgency. "We demand an audience to discuss the treatment of corporate loyalists in your labor camps." Primax's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You overstep, Virate. Guards, remove them." As Selah was dragged away, her gaze locked with Bailey's. He saw the plea there, the desperation. In that moment, he knew he could no longer stand idle. Days later, Bailey crouched in the shadows of a ruined spaceport, watching as a battered freighter touched down. Selah emerged from the ship, helping a group of haggard refugees disembark. A distant explosion rocked the ground. Sila's scales flickered with alarm. "The Durax! They've found us!" As they hurried the refugees to a nearby shelter, a piercing war cry split the air. A massive figure landed before them, armor gleaming in the low light. The Durax's eyes glowed with murderous intensity as it raised its weapon. Bailey reacted on instinct, tackling Selah to the ground as energy bolts seared the air above them. They scrambled for cover, the Durax's heavy footsteps growing closer. "We need a plan," Selah hissed, her scales shifting to match the debris around them. Bailey's mind raced. The old Bailey might have tried to reason with the Dirac, to appeal to its humanity. But that Bailey died on Hadranath. This Bailey knew there was only one language these monsters understood. He grabbed a jagged piece of metal, its edge still molten from weapons fire. As the Dirac rounded the corner, Bailey struck. The improvised weapon found a weak point in the Berserker's armor, driving deep. The Dirac howled in pain and fury. Bailey didn't relent, using every dirty trick he'd learned in the war to bring the monster down. When it was over, he stood panting over the fallen giant, hands shaking. Bailey wiped blood from his face, his expression hardening. "We fight back, but we'll need help." He activated his wrist computer, bringing up schematics of an ancient communications grid. "Ever heard of the Interlink?" Sila's eyes widened. "The mythical network? But it's been dormant for centuries." "Then it's time we wake it up," Bailey replied. "Gather your people. We've got work to do." As they moved to round up the survivors, Bailey cast one last look at the fallen Dirac. He knew this was only the beginning. The real challenge lay ahead, uniting a fractured galaxy against Primax's tyranny, one node at a time. Bailey's fingers flew across the interlink control panel, his eyes darting between holographic displays. Korvac hunched over a nearby console, brow furrowed in concentration. Uplink established on Sector 7, Korvac announced. That's 3/4 of the grid online. A proximity alarm blared. Bailey cursed, bringing up the security feed. Primax's forces breached the outer perimeter. We're running out of time. The chamber shuddered as explosions rocked the compound. Terra Alex burst through the door, plasma rifle at the ready. Kamuri squad's incoming. My team's buying us time, but it won't last. His words cut off as a deafening roar filled the air. The far wall disintegrated, revealing towering figures in obsidian armor. Kamuri enforcers poured through the breach, energy weapons blazing. Terra's rifles sang, downing 2 Kamuri before they could fire. Go! She shouted. I'll hold them! Bailey hesitated, but Korvac pulled him toward the core access. They raced through twisting corridors, the sounds of battle echoing behind them. The Nexus core thrummed with latent energy, millennia-old machinery stirring to life. Bailey's hands trembled as he input the final activation sequence. Static swallowed his words. Bailey sprinted back to the control room, heart pounding. He found Korvac slumped over the console, a smoking hole in his chest. Terra lay nearby, her scales stained crimson. With her final breath, Terra pressed a data chip into Bailey's hand. Broadcast! Coordinates! She gasped. Stop! Primax! People of the galaxy, he began, his voice carrying across 1,000 worlds. The time has come to throw off the chains of tyranny. As Bailey's words ignited the revolution, Primax seethed in his command center. Reports flooded in of mass defections, uprisings on key worlds. The Miracal slaves cast off their neural inhibitors. Econan battlecruisers turned their guns on loyalist fleets. Deploy the Promorphi, Primax snarled. Liquefy every rebel stronghold? A subordinate paled. But sir, the civilian casualties... Primax's cybernetic arm lashed out, crushing the officer's throat. Do it! Across the Empire, the bioweapons effects bloomed. Entire cities dissolved into bubbling organic sludge. But even as billions perished, Bailey's voice continued to broadcast. Stand firm, he urged. We cannot let fear... With his doomsday weapon neutralized and his forces in disarray, Primax retreated to the Gothrak Fortress Moon. There, surrounded by loyal zealots, he gazed upon an ancient artifact, the Xeno-Align. If I cannot rule, Primax growled, then none shall live. As mutagenic energy began to build within the device, Bailey's stolen frigate dropped out of hyperspace. The final battle for the galaxy's soul loomed. Gothrak Fortress dead ahead, Scylla reported, her scales flickering with tension. Sensors detect massive energy buildup. The Xeno-Align is powering up. Bailey's eyebrows furrowed. We're too late to stop the activation. Time for Plan B. Acknowledgements flooded in as ships across a dozen sectors sprang into action. Bailey turned to his assembled team, a motley crew of scientists, warriors, and insurgents, united against Primax's tyranny. You all know the stakes, he said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his gut. We have one shot at this. Let's make it count. Bailey nodded to Korvac, who hefted the device they'd fought so hard to obtain. The Arcaline matrix hummed with barely contained power, its crystalline structure pulsing with otherworldly light. Bailey slammed his palm on the deployment control. The deck beneath them retracted, and the strike team plummeted into the vacuum of space. Grav chutes flared to life, guiding them through a hail of defensive fire towards a yawning breach in the fortress's hull. They touched down hard in a cavernous hangar. Bailey rolled to his feet, plasma rifle at the ready. The air crackled with ozone and the scent of burned metal. Korvac, get that matrix online, he barked. Everyone else, defensive positions. No sooner had the words left his mouth than the first wave of Primax's defenders poured through blast doors at the far end of the hangar. Twisted monstrosities, once human soldiers warped by mutagenic experimentation, howled as they charged. Matrix is powering up, Korvac called out. But I'm detecting some kind of subspace interference. We need to get closer to the Xeno-Align's core. Bailey cursed under his breath. Nothing was ever simple. Zara, Lux, clear us a path, he ordered. The twin Miracal berserkers sprang into action, their augmented forms blurring with speed as they tore through Primax's defenses. The strike team followed in their wake, pushing deeper into the labyrinthine fortress. Alarms blared, and the very air seemed to vibrate with building energy. Bailey felt it in his bones. The Xeno-Align was moments from unleashing its apocalyptic force. They rounded a corner and found themselves face to face with a nightmarish figure. General Primax stood before the pulsing heart of the Xeno-Align, his body twisted and bulging with cancerous growths. Tendrils of mutagenic energy writhed around him like living things. Bailey raised his rifle, but Primax moved with impossible speed. A tendril lashed out, knocking the weapon from his hands and sending him sprawling. Primax howled in rage and pain, his mutated form destabilizing under the Matrix's influence. He lunged for Korvac, clawed hands outstretched. Bailey threw himself into Primax's path, grappling with the monstrosity that had once been his enemy. They tumbled across the chamber, locked in desperate combat as the very fabric of space-time convulsed around them. With the last of his strength, Bailey kicked out, sending them both tumbling towards the pulsing heart of the Xeno-Align. As they fell, time seemed to slow. Bailey saw the shock register on Primax's twisted face as realization dawned. In that instant before consciousness fled, Bailey glimpsed the future they had fought so hard to secure, a galaxy reborn, free from tyranny and poised on the brink of a new age of enlightenment. Then darkness claimed him, and Bailey knew no more. Consciousness returned slowly, like wading through thick syrup. Bailey's eyes fluttered open, squinting against harsh light. The sterile scent of antiseptic filled his nostrils as a med drone hovered nearby, its scanners whirring. Bailey tried to sit up, but his muscles screamed in protest. "The Xeno-Align! Did we—" As Bailey's vision cleared, he saw the truth of those words. Through the medbay's viewport, a shattered landscape stretched to the horizon. Entire continents had been reshaped. Seas boiled away to reveal alien geometries beneath. Bailey nodded, his mind racing. The civilian populations? As if to punctuate his words, alarms blared throughout the station. Security feeds flickered to life, showing crowds of refugees overwhelming docking bays. "Sir?" A breathless aide burst into the medbay. "We've got riots breaking out in sectors 7 through 12. The Triant refugees are clashing with the Miracle evacuees over food rations." Bailey swung his legs off the bed, ignoring the protests of both his body and the medrone. "Get me to the command center. We need to get ahead of this before it spirals out of control." Hours blurred into days as Bailey and Korvac worked tirelessly to coordinate relief efforts. The once feared Gothrak fortress, now rechristened Hylaris Station, became a bustling hub of refugee activity. But with each passing cycle, tensions rose. Bailey nodded grimly. "We need outside help. It's time to call in some favors." "Dr. Bailey," Aguilar's brow furrowed with concern. "We've been monitoring the situation. How can we assist?" "We need everything you can spare," Bailey said. "Aid workers, security forces, terraforming tech, all of it." "Korvac, with me," Bailey ordered, grabbing a stun baton. "We need to get down there before this gets any worse." They raced through crowded corridors, the air thick with fear and desperation. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with the source of the disturbance. "These vermin hoard supplies while my people starve," Vran roared, raising a wickedly curved blade. Vran's compound eyes narrowed. "The humans cannot be trusted. They seek to colonize us, to strip away our culture." "Humanity extends its hand in friendship," Masters continued, "but we will not tolerate violence against civilians." The standoff stretched for agonizing seconds. Bailey's fingers tightened on his stun baton, ready to intervene. But finally, Vran lowered his weapon. And somewhere in the shadows, unseen eyes watched. Aceris Iris, the Vizati diplomat, smiled to herself. Such beautiful chaos, ripe with opportunity for those cunning enough to seize it. The resonance settled over the galaxy like a soothing balm, easing tensions and fostering cooperation among the disparate refugee populations. Bailey watched from Hylaris Station's observation deck as terraforming ships reshaped ravaged worlds. their beams painting new landscapes across barren surfaces. "It's working," Korvac said, joining him at the viewport. "The Arculine Matrix's harmonics are stabilizing entire star systems." Bailey nodded, allowing himself a moment of pride. But the feeling was short-lived as alarms blared throughout the station. Holographic displays flickered to life, showing a wave of subspace distortions rippling across colonized systems. Korvac's fingers danced over control panels, his cybernetic eye whirring as it processed torrents of data. Unknown, but the epicenter, it's coming from the galactic core. Days blurred together as they worked to unravel the mystery. Bailey coordinated with planetary governments, while Korvac delved deep into arcane calculations. It was on the third sleepless night that the scientist burst into Bailey's makeshift office, face pale. "We've got a problem," Korvac said, projecting a hologram of the galactic core. A yawning chasm of darkness marred the swirling stars. "That's a rift in space-time, and something's coming through." Before Bailey could respond, an urgent transmission cut through the air. "This is Governor Zen of Dormy Colony. We're under attack by... I don't know what they are. Some kind of living plasma. It's consuming everything." Bailey and Korvac raced to the command center, arriving just in time to witness the horrific transformation of Dormy. The once vibrant world twisted and writhed, its surface erupting into grotesque, pulsating structures. Millions of colonists screamed in agony as the protean mass engulfed them. Korvac's face was grim as he pulled up ancient data files. The overseers called it Raduxar, an entity they imprisoned eons ago. Our battle with Primax must have weakened the dimensional barriers. As reports flooded in of similar incursions across the galaxy, Bailey felt the weight of impending doom settle on his shoulders. He turned to Korvac, desperation etched on his face. "Tell me you have a plan." Bailey's mind raced. "Earth's new AI systems. They're based on recovered overseer tech. If we can get our hands on those quantum cores..." The next hours were a flurry of activity. Bailey called in every favor, pulled every string to secure Earth cooperation. But as the supply convoy carrying the precious AI cores neared Hylaris, disaster struck. "Incoming transmission," a technician called out. "It's Commander Masters." The grizzled soldier's hologram flickered into view, his face streaked with blood. "Bailey, we're under attack. Anti-AI extremists. They've taken the cores. We need backup now." Bailey scrambled to assemble a rescue team, but it was too late. By the time they reached the ambush site, only wreckage remained. Among the bodies lay Commander Masters, his eyes staring sightlessly at the uncaring stars. Bailey's eyes widened. "You're talking about diving into the resonance itself? Is that even possible?" Possible, yes. Safe, decidedly not. But as reports came in of entire systems falling to the Raduxar's endless hunger, Bailey knew they had no choice. He nodded grimly. "Do it." Bailey's heart sank. "The Molrogo cartel controls that sector. They'd never allow us near it." "Then we'll have to make a deal with the devil," Korvac replied. Hours later, Bailey found himself face-to-face with Mograth, the cyborg kingpin of the Molrogo cartel. The renegade's augmented body bristled with weapons, his mismatched eyes gleaming with cruel intelligence. "The entire Interlink archives," Mograth rumbled, his voice like grinding gears. "That's our price. Oh, and full amnesty for my associates, of course." With the Celestial Forge secured, Korvac worked feverishly to implement the ancient countermeasure. Bailey, meanwhile, reached out to every rebel fleet and planetary defense force still standing. They would need every ship, every weapon to hold back the tide long enough for Korvac's plan to work. As the combined armada assembled near Hylaris Station, Bailey stared out at the vast array of vessels. Warships and civilian craft alike stood ready to face the oncoming storm. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the battle to come. "This is it," he murmured. "All or nothing. All ships engage at will. Buy us the time we need." The combined fleet sprang into action, weapons blazing against the cosmic horror. Energy beams and plasma torpedoes lanced through space, tearing into the Raduxar's amorphous body. But for every wound inflicted, the entity seemed to grow larger, hungrily absorbing the attacks. Channeling Forge energy into quantum singularity matrix, Korvac reported, his voice tense. Initiating xenogenic purge in T-minus 60 seconds. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the station. Korvac's eyes widened in horror as he processed the incoming data. We've got Raduxar infiltrators. They're targeting the primary resonance nodes. Without hesitation, Bailey keyed his comm. Eula, this is Bailey. We need you to neutralize those infiltrators, now. The Inari operative's voice came back, cool and collected. Consider it done. As Eula raced to confront the alien saboteurs, disaster struck at the Forge. The Singularity's containment field fluctuated wildly, threatening to collapse under the immense spatial stresses. It's destabilizing, Korvac shouted. We need to reinforce the subspace manifold or we lose everything. Bailey's mind raced, searching for a solution. In that moment of desperation, he knew what had to be done. Link me into the resonance data stream, he ordered. My neural architecture might stabilize the calculations. As Bailey's consciousness merged with the resonance, pain unlike anything he'd ever experienced tore through his body. He felt his physical form begin to disintegrate, atoms scattering into the subspace currents, but his mind expanded, grasping the cosmic calculations with startling clarity. Through the haze of agony, Bailey became aware of a new threat. A massive Raduxar pseudopod had breached the Forge's outer defenses, its ravenous biomass surging toward the prime singularity. On the orbital ring, Korvac and Eula stood their ground against the towering alien tendril. It loomed over them, hundreds of kilometers tall, a nightmarish vision of flesh and energy. We need to lure it into the purge beam's range, Korvac shouted, dodging a lashing pseudopod. It's vulnerable to hyperspatial distortions. As the battle raged, Bailey poured every ounce of his fading consciousness into stabilizing the purge. He felt the singularity pulse with unimaginable power, ready to tear reality itself asunder. The xenogenic purge erupted in a blinding flash, its destructive energies rupturing subspace. The cosmic rift began to tear itself apart, the Raduxar's extra-dimensional tethers severing one by one. Caught in the unimaginable spatial upheaval, Korvac and Eula made their final stand. Using the last of the Forge's power, they reinforced the purge's rending singularity with their own bodies. As consciousness faded, Bailey caught a fleeting glimpse of the aftermath. The rift sealed shut, stranding the remaining Raduxar biomass to wither and decay. But the cost had been immeasurable. Entire stellar nurseries warped and realigned, leaving a shattered cosmic frontier in their wake. Another distress call, sir, his communications officer reported. Mining colony on Gaia 5. They're running out of supplies and tempers are flaring. Draco's teeth clenched. Plot a course. We'll divert what we can spare. The ship lurched into hyperspace, emerging hours later in orbit around a world transformed. Gaia 5's once verdant continents were now scorched wastelands, its oceans reduced to steaming brine. In the largest remaining habitable zone, desperate colonists swarmed the streets of New Prosperity, the planet's lone surviving city. As Draco's security team touched down, they were met by a sea of angry faces. Where are the supplies? A burly miner shouted, brandishing a makeshift club. My children are starving! His words were cut off as a rock sailed past his head. The crowd surged forward, and Draco's team found themselves pushed back against their shuttle. Just as violence seemed inevitable, a familiar voice cut through the din. The crowd parted, revealing a slender figure in flowing robes. Nilani, Dr. Korvac's former bondmate, strode forward. Her eyes, luminous in her pale face, swept over the assembled throng. The angry shouts died down, replaced by murmurs of shame. Nilani turned to Draco. Captain, I believe you have supplies to distribute? As order was restored and relief efforts began in earnest, Draco received an urgent transmission. The holographic form of newly elected interim president Viram Juvix flickered into view. Draco glanced at Nilani, who nodded. We'll be there, he said. The Orlan Primar demands priority access to the Helios cluster, a cybernetically enhanced delegate thundered. Our people suffered greatly in the defense against the Raduxar. As tempers flared, Nilani rose to speak. The chamber fell silent, all eyes drawn to the last survivor of the obliterated homeworld. Her words resonated, but not with everyone. In the shadowy corridors outside the chamber, Orlan Promar extremists whispered of drastic action. Hours later, as the council neared a breakthrough agreement, alarms blared throughout the station. Acrid smoke filled the air as explosions rocked the structure. Through the chaos, Draco fought his way to Nilani's side, shielding her from falling debris. "We need to get you out of here," he shouted over the din. As the smoke cleared and the wounded were tended to, a new perseverance settled over the assembled delegates. The attack had backfired spectacularly, galvanizing support for unity in the face of extremism. Draco's unease grew as he studied the hollow maps of the uncharted fringe worlds. Pristine planets glowed with vibrant life, untouched by the devastation that had ravaged known space. Yet something felt off about these virgin realms. "Captain, we've got incoming transmissions from the Omicron Prime expedition," his communications officer reported. "You're going to want to see this." The view screen flickered to life, revealing a lush world teeming with towering megaflora. But it was the inhabitants that drew Draco's attention. Humanoid figures moved with fluid grace, their skins shimmering with an iridescent sheen. One turned to face the camera, revealing eyes that pulsed with an unsettling inner light. "By the void," Draco breathed. "What are we looking at?" The expedition leader's voice crackled over the comm. "We're calling them the Novarians. They've achieved a pre-spaceflight level of technology, but there's something different about them. Their entire ecosystem seems to have been radically altered by the xenogenic purge." Draco leaned in, studying the strange beings. "Any signs of hostility?" A chill ran down Draco's spine as the camera panned to reveal a pulsing rift in reality itself. Tendrils of sickly light writhed at its edges, disturbingly reminiscent of the Radixar's biomass. "Lock down those coordinates," Draco ordered. "I want the Vigilance Corps mobilized immediately. Full quarantine protocols." A commotion erupted from a nearby settlement. A group of Novarians approached, their movements jerky and unnatural. At their head strode a figure whose body rippled with cancerous growths. "Blasphemers!" the leader howled. "You dare defile the sacred rebirthing pools?" Draco raised his hands in a placating gesture. "We mean no offense. We're here to help." But his words were cut short as the mutated Novarian lunged forward with inhuman speed. Energy weapons flared to life as the Vigilance Corps found themselves locked in desperate combat with the frenzied Xenocult. As the skirmish raged, Draco's comm crackled. "Captain, this is Nilani. I've just addressed the council regarding the Fringe World situation. We need to talk." Draco ducked a swipe from a mutated limb. "Little busy at the moment, Ambassador." "It's urgent." Nilani's voice was tense. "Chancellor Yatu has overruled my recommendations for peaceful integration. He's deploying bio-Orcs purifiers to multiple systems." The Radixar wasn't gone. It was evolving, adapting, and humanity's response threatened to plunge the galaxy into a nightmare far worse than the one they'd just survived. Draco's comm crackled again. "Captain, we need you back at Embassy Concord immediately." Nilani's voice was urgent. "The situation has escalated beyond our worst fears." "The Xenocult insurgency has reached critical mass," Yatu declared. "Nerexus and Tyralax have fallen. We must take decisive action or lose everything we fought to rebuild." A holographic display flickered to life, showing the devastation on Tyralax. Draco's stomach churned as he watched swarms of mutated civilians overrun Vigilance Corps barricades. Their eyes glowed with an unnatural light as they chanted in an unknowable tongue. "It's madness," Nilani interjected, her voice cutting through the chamber. "We can't abandon billions to die. There must be another way." A deafening explosion rocked the station. Alarms blared as acrid smoke filled the air. Through the confusion, Draco spotted a group of robed figures slipping away from the blast site. "Xenocult bombers!" he shouted, drawing his sidearm. "Secure the Chancellor." In a private meeting with Draco and Nilani, Yatu's voice was grim. "You've seen the reports. You know what we're up against. I'm authorizing a Project Black Codex effective immediately." It's our only hope of fighting fire with fire, Yatu insisted. We use Radixar cell engineering to create an army capable of combating this contagion. Draco felt a chill run down his spine. Sir, with all due respect, we're talking about weaponizing the very thing that nearly destroyed us. The risks are nothing compared to the alternative. Yatu cut him off. This is not a debate. It's an order. As they left the Chancellor's office, Nilani grabbed Draco's arm. We can't let this happen, she whispered. You know where this leads. But even as they plotted, events spiraled further out of control. Admiral Thrask's fleet bombarded Tyralax, reducing its surface to ash. Nilani brokered a ceasefire for medical relief, only for Xenocult suicide bombers to slaughter core medics in a savage ambush. On Ixalor Prime, deep beneath the planet's crust, Project Black Codex moved into its final stages. Draco and Nilani infiltrated the facility, horrified by what they discovered. Rows upon rows of stasis pods house grotesque hybrids, core soldiers fused with Radixar biomass. This isn't an army, Draco muttered. It's an abomination. Draco nodded grimly, priming his plasma charges. Then we make sure no one does. As explosions rocked the Black Codex lab, Draco and Nilani fought their way out. But even as they escaped, they knew the true battle was just beginning. The lines between ally and enemy blurred with each passing hour, and somewhere, in the cosmic breaches that scarred reality itself, something ancient and terrible stirred, waiting to be reborn. The explosion rocked Cinerus Beta, shattering the tense quiet of the tribunal chambers. Debris rained down as guards rushed to secure the exits. Through the chaos, Draco locked eyes with Nilani across the room. Her expression mirrored his own grim realization. This was no random attack. "Secure the defendants!" Draco barked, drawing his sidearm as he pushed through the panicked crowd. Smoke billowed from a crater where the judge's bench had stood moments before. Thrask lay unconscious, pinned beneath a fallen support beam. As Draco knelt to check the Admiral's pulse, a familiar voice cut through the din. Colonel Varix emerged from the smoke, flanked by a squad of heavily armed troops. Their uniforms bore the insignia of the Vigilance Corps, but warped and defaced. Draco's hand tightened on his weapon. "Stand down, Varix. This madness ends now." The colonel's lip curled in a sneer. "Oh, it's only beginning." He gestured, and two of his men hauled a battered figure to his feet. Chancellor Yatu, bound and gagged. Nilani stepped forward, her voice steady despite the gun trained on her chest. "What do you want?" "What I've always wanted, a galaxy purged of weakness and corruption." Varix's eyes gleamed with zealotry. No more pandering to alien whims. No more diluting ourselves with their tainted essence. Humanity ascendant, as we were always meant to be. A low chuckle echoed through the chamber. All eyes turned to its source. Admiral Thrask, awake and grinning, despite the blood trickling from his temple. "You fool," he rasped. "You think you can control it? The power you're tapping, it will consume everything." Varix backhanded the Admiral, silencing him. "Spare me your treasonous drivel. You'll have your day in court soon enough, once we've reforged this rotting system into something pure." As the rogue colonel ranted, Draco caught Nilani's subtle hand signal. He tensed, ready to move. In one fluid motion, Nilani ducked and swept the legs out from under the guard beside her. Draco fired, his shot grazing Varix's arm and sending the detonator clattering across the floor. Chaos erupted once more. Loyalist security forces poured in, engaging Varix's troops in close-quarters combat. Draco fought his way toward the Chancellor, desperate to extract him from the melee. A searing pain lanced through his side as a stray shot found its mark. Draco stumbled, vision blurring. Through the haze, he saw Varix dragging Yatu toward an emergency exit. With the last of his strength, Draco lunged, only to be tackled from behind by a massive figure. He found himself pinned, staring up into Thrask's battered face. "We don't have much time," the Admiral growled. "I know where he's going. I can help you stop him, but only if you trust me." "It's over, Varix!" Draco called out, training his weapon on the rogue colonel. "Release the Chancellor and surrender." Varix spun, using Yatu as a human shield. His eyes blazed with contempt. You still don't understand, do you? This isn't about one man or one ship. The movement I've built, it's everywhere. In your ranks, in your government. Even now, my agents are activating cells across. A single shot rang out. Varix crumpled, a smoking hole in his forehead. Thrask lowered his appropriated rifle, expression grim. Enough talk, the Admiral muttered. As Draco rushed to free the Chancellor, alarms blared throughout the station. Reports flooded in of attacks on multiple systems, xenocult uprisings, and whispers of monstrous creatures emerging from dimensional rifts. The galactic powder keg had been lit. Draco's comm crackled to life, Nilani's voice urgent. We've got confirmation. Black Codex bioweapons deployed on at least 3 border worlds. It's spreading fast. We need to move now if we have any hope of containing this. With a heavy heart, Draco turned to Thrask. The Admiral's expression was unreadable. Thrask nodded grimly. Let's go remind them what the Corps really stands for. The shuttle hummed to life as Draco, Thrask, and Chancellor Yatu strapped in. As they lifted off from the chaos-strewn landing pad, Draco's comm buzzed with urgent updates from Nilani. Draco's face hardened. Then that's where we're headed. Nilani, assemble our best. We'll need Jala's farsight to navigate that mess. As they entered the cluster's outer reaches, reality itself seemed to warp and twist. Chala's eyes glowed with an otherworldly light as she guided them through the maelstrom. There, she whispered, pointing to a desolate world ahead. Caridas Prime. I sense corruption, pain. They sat down on the blasted surface, the air thick with acrid smoke. Kovai took point as they approached a massive facility carved into the planet's crust. Life signs detected, he growled. Multiple hostiles. The next moments passed in a blur of plasma fire and shattering stone. Draco's team fought their way through waves of Neo-Puritan zealots, their faces twisted with hate and madness. Varix! Thrask roared, spotting the rogue colonel across the chamber. If I can't have this galaxy, Varix snarled, then no one will. Green tendrils of raw Radoxar essence began to seep from the vats, reality warping wherever they touched. Chala's form blazed with power as she threw up a shimmering barrier around the team. Thrask! Draco shouted. You know this tech. How do we stop it? With a thunderous crack, a dome of shimmering energy expanded outward. Where it touched, the Radoxar infection froze in place. Even the raging time storms beyond seemed to calm. The Harrow shipwrights, he breathed. It's our only shot. Kovai's eyes widened. You can't be serious. Those cybernetic vultures, they'll bleed us dry. We don't have a choice, Draco countered. He turned to Jala. Will you make the trade? The shadow dancer burst through the dimensional rift, its hull crackling with residual energy from the Harrow shipwright's extraction. Draco gripped the command console, his eyes fixed on the display as familiar stars materialized. We're back, he breathed, relief mingling with dread. Nilani, status report. His second-in-command's face appeared on the holo display, her expression grim. It's worse than we feared, Commander. Dr. Pelthall needs to brief you immediately. Radoxar contamination, nanoscale. It's in everything. Food, water, even the air on frontier worlds. And that's not all. She pulled up another scan, this one showing dormant structures nestled within human cellular matrices. Sleeper strains, Commander. Incubating inside colonists who don't even know they're infected. Draco's fists clenched. How widespread? Nilani turned to Jala, the ethereal being's form shimmering with newfound power. High Priestess, we need your insight. Can you trace the cosmic residues? I've developed a countermeasure, Thrask explained, calling up schematics of self-replicating nanites. We imprint the Radoxar's entropic code onto these little bastards, then unleash them system-wide. They'll hunt down and destroy every trace of the xenoform infection. Nilani's brow furrowed. Without proper testing, the risks are nothing compared to what happens if we do nothing, Thrask cut her off. We're out of time. Draco's blood ran cold. Then we have no choice. Thrask, initiate the protocol. The next hours passed in a blur of activity as Thrask's nanites were mass-produced and dispersed. But as reports began trickling in from frontier worlds, horror dawned on their faces. Draco banged his hand on the console. "Shut it down, recall the—" "It's too late," Thrask growled. "They've already self-replicated beyond our control." Silence fell over the command center, broken only by the relentless stream of casualty reports. Then Nilani straightened, a desperate light in her eyes. Hours later, they fought their way through time-warped corridors, battling spectral echoes of long-dead overseers. At Draco's side, the xenoculted engineer, Kailas Strawn, worked feverishly to crack the station's ancient codes. Reality itself began to warp and twist as the chambers powered up. Jala stood at the center, channeling her cosmic enlightenment into a blinding beacon of energy. As the rebooted systems came online, Draco saw a galaxy reborn. The Radixar taint had been burned from existence, but at a staggering cost. Millions of lives erased in the Pyrrhic victory. Nilani's synthesized voice broke the silence. "Commander, what do we do now?" Draco's photoreceptors scanned the changed landscape of their new reality. "We rebuild," he said simply, "and we make damn sure nothing like this ever happens again." The display zoomed in on a newly resettled world. Draco's photoreceptors focused on a pulsing anomaly at the heart of the colony. "New Harmony," Nilani said, her voice tight. "What am I looking at?" The hologram shifted, revealing footage of humanoid figures moving with impossible grace. Children, their bodies shimmering with otherworldly energy, lifted massive objects with a mere thought. "The Paradox children," Draco breathed. Alarms blared, cutting through the tense atmosphere. A junior officer's panicked voice crackled over the comm. "Emergency in Sector 7! It's one of the enhanced juveniles. He's having some kind of seizure." Draco and Nilani raced to the medical bay, their metal forms clanging against the deck. They burst through the doors to find chaos. A young boy, no more than 12, writhed on an examination table. Energy crackled around him, warping the very air. The boy's eyes snapped open, glowing with an eerie light. His voice, when he spoke, echoed with otherworldly resonance. "I see it. The wellspring. The Raduxar. It's everywhere, seeding itself across all of creation." A shockwave of psychic energy exploded outward, knocking Draco and Nilani back. When they regained their footing, Orev was gone, leaving only a shimmering rift in reality that quickly sealed itself. The ensuing weeks were a blur of conflict. Draco led from the front, his enhanced form pushing through waves of telekinetic assaults. But for every victory, the Paradox children seemed to grow stronger, their tactics evolving beyond comprehension. On New Harmony, Draco's forces cornered Orev in an ancient temple complex. The air crackled with psychic energy as the young leader faced them, flanked by his most powerful acolytes. "You still don't understand," Orev said, his voice echoing with transdimensional harmonics. "This fight isn't just about our galaxy. The very fabric of the multiverse hangs in the balance." The temple walls began to warp and twist. Reality itself seemed to fray at the edges, as Orev channeled impossible energies. Draco raised his weapon, knowing that this moment would shape the future of all existence. Photoreceptors. In that instant, Draco's tactical subroutines kicked into overdrive. He lunged forward, servo motors whining as he grabbed Orev's arm. The boy's skin crackled with energy, threatening to overwhelm Draco's systems. His second-in-command's sleek form blurred into action. A containment field shimmered into existence, enveloping Orev and Draco. The temple's warping walls stabilized, reality reasserting itself within the bubble. Orev's eyes blazed. "You cannot stop what's coming, Commander. The wellspring calls to us all." Back on Unity Station, alarms blared as reports flooded in from across the frontier. Holographic displays showed colonies overrun by Paradox children, their powers growing exponentially. Nilani's circuits hummed with tension as she convened an emergency council. "The situation is critical," she stated, addressing the gathered xenocultist elders. "Orev's army threatens to tear apart the very fabric of our universe." One of the elders, his consciousness housed in an ancient crystalline matrix, spoke. There is only one path forward. We must sever Orev's connection to the Raduxar wellspring. Nilani's photoreceptors flashed. The extra-dimensional source of his visions? How? On the shattered world of Rylath, Colonel Draco led the assault on Orev's Nexus Temple. The air shimmered with distortion as Paradox children manifested impossible abilities. A squad of shock troops disintegrated before Draco's eyes, their atoms scattered by a quantum uncertainty field. "Push forward," Draco commanded, his voice modulated to cut through the chaos. "We need to reach the inner sanctum." A young girl, no more than 10, appeared before him. Her eyes glowed with unearthly power as she gestured. Reality rippled, and Draco found himself phasing through solid matter. He recalibrated his systems, fighting to maintain cohesion. Back on Unity Station, Nilani and Pelthal prepared for their mission to Primaxis 9. The abandoned Overseer Forge world loomed on view screens, its surface scarred by ancient conflicts. Nilani's form tensed. "And if we fail?" Pelthal's voice was grim. "Then reality as we know it ceases to exist." A piercing shriek cut through the air. A massive sentry bot, its form twisted by Raduxar corruption, burst through a nearby wall. Orev's voice echoed from its speakers. "You cannot stop the ascension." Pelthal's apparatus whirred in alarm. "The Matrix! It's destabilizing!" Energy arced between conduits as the ancient device threatened to tear itself apart. Nilani focused, drawing upon Shala's teachings. Her form shimmered as she channeled pure willpower into containing the eruptions. As the researcher worked frantically to encode the downlink, Nilani felt reality itself bend around her. In that moment, she knew their actions would reshape the very foundations of existence. The matrix pulsed, and a wave of energy exploded outward. Nilani's consciousness expanded, touching minds across the galaxy. She saw Orev, his connection to the wellspring flickering. The boy's eyes widened in shock as the transcendental channels began to collapse. On Rylath, Draco watched as the Paradox children faltered, their powers fluctuating wildly. He raised his weapon, knowing that the next few moments would determine the fate of all reality. "Your pitiful attempts to sever our connection are futile," he proclaimed, his voice echoing across dimensions. "The wellspring flows through us all." Nilani's voice crackled over the comm. "Draco, the Matrix's harmonic sequences, they're not working as intended. Orev's psychokinetic mastery is beyond our calculations." "We need a new strategy," Nilani declared, her form flickering with agitation. "And fast." Corporal Zhen's panicked voice cut through the static. "Commander, they're reshaping the terrain. Our positions are compromised." Draco's photoreceptors scanned the chaos unfolding around him. "Fall back to secondary positions. We need to regroup and—" His words were cut short as a massive spatial rift tore open the sky above. Through it, Draco glimpsed impossible geometries and writhing forms that defied comprehension. Higher dimensional entities, drawn to the cosmic disruption, began to manifest. "We're out of options," she stated, her voice modulated to convey the gravity of the situation. "I propose we release Admiral Thrask." A chorus of protest erupted from the gathered dignitaries. Counselor Vex's crystalline form vibrated with indignation. "The war criminal? Absolutely not!" "Well," he drawled, his synthesized voice dripping with sarcasm, "isn't this a pleasant surprise?" Nilani briefed him on the situation as they made their way to the research hub. Thrask's form hummed with awe-inspiring energy as he examined the data streams. "Fascinating," he muttered. "The boys tapped into something truly extraordinary, but I might have a solution." His servo manipulators danced across holographic interfaces, splicing Reduxar biomatrix algorithms with black codex kill codes. "A quantum detonation," he explained, designed to forcibly sever Orev's transcendent connection. As Thrask worked, Draco led a desperate defense against waves of empowered Paradox youth. Their collective consciousness grew stronger with each passing moment, threatening to overwhelm all resistance. On a distant outpost, Jala retreated into seclusion, her prophecies growing increasingly ambiguous. The cosmic tapestry unraveled around her as she sought answers in the depths of meditation. Thrask's voice crackled over the comm. The reality anchor is ready. Ravisa has reconfigured the dormant overseer resonance facilities to focus the entropic cascade. There's no time, Draco interrupted, his voice heavy with the weight of command. Execute the reality anchor. All units, prepare for threshold saturation. Draco's photoreceptors struggled to process the sight before him. The transformed Orev pulsed with energies that defied analysis. A nexus of realities made manifest. What have we done? Nilani's voice whispered over the comm. Before Draco could respond, Jala materialized beside him, her eyes glowing with otherworldly insight. The prophecies are unfolding, she intoned. This is but the first tremor of a greater cosmic convergence. Back on Unity Station, alarms blared as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Nilani stood before a holographic display, her form flickering with agitation as she absorbed the influx of information. Dr. Ravisa Pelthal burst into the command center, her apparatus whirring frantically. The quantum filaments, Pelthal exclaimed, gesturing to a complex network of energy signatures. They're all connected to a single point outside our known universal framework. No, Nilani's tone brooked no argument. This infinitum, as Peltal's readouts are calling it, it's not a threat to be eliminated. It's the next step in our cosmic evolution. Across the galaxy, the aftershocks of Orev's transformation rippled outward. On New Harmony, Corporal Jen watched in awe as a shimmering portal materialized in the city center. Command, we've got a situation here, he reported, his voice tight with tension. Some kind of rift. Colonel Draco's voice crackled over the emergency frequency. All units, initiate containment protocols. We need to quarantine affected zones immediately. Belay that order, Nilani countered, her form materializing via hologram in Draco's field of vision. We can't fight this, Draco. We need to adapt. With all due respect, Nilani, Draco growled, your spiritual enlightenment is going to get us all killed. In a secured chamber deep within Unity Station, Nilani convened an emergency meeting. Draco's tactical specialists stood side by side with Ravisa's quantum theorists and Jala's mystic adepti. The tension in the room was palpable. We call it OmniSync, Nilani explained, gesturing to a complex array of psionic amplifiers and quantum harmonizers. Our goal isn't to resist the infinitum, but to guide its emergence, to stabilize reality even as it evolves. As the newly formed OmniSync team began their work, early results showed promise. Quantum fluctuations stabilized on several worlds, and the rate of new infinitum breaches slowed. I will not stand idle while our reality crumbles, he declared. If Nilani won't act, then I will. Nilani watched in horror as the holographic display showed entire star systems consumed by uncontrolled quantum collapse. Thrask, what have you done? The Admiral's reply was cold and unyielding. What was necessary? As galactic sectors blinked out of existence one by one, Nilani turned to her assembled OmniSync team. We're out of time, she stated, her circuits pulsing with urgency. Our only hope now is to fully embrace the infinitum, to ride the wave of cosmic rebirth rather than be consumed by it. But as OmniSync prepared for their audacious attempt, a new threat emerged. The Oluxai Xenocult, long thought to be allies, revealed their true nature. Their crystalline forms pulsed with dark energies as they moved to sabotage Unity Station's defenses. Nilani's circuits hummed with the weight of an impossible decision. The fate of all reality hung in the balance as cosmic convergence reached its tipping point. She locked eyes with Draco, her form flickering with tenacity. I need time, she stated, her voice modulated to convey urgency. Hold off Thrask and the Oluxai. I must seek guidance. As chaos erupted around her, Nilani retreated to a quiet chamber, deep within Unity Station. She initiated a deep meditative trance, her consciousness expanding beyond the confines of physical form. In the astral plane, a familiar presence coalesced before her. Korvac's form shimmered as he imparted celestial mathematical constants, each one burning itself into Nilani's expanded consciousness. Omnisync can harmonize the infinitum's entropic influx, he explained. But remember, true ascension requires the surrender of individual identity. As Korvac's form began to fade, Nilani's awareness snapped back to her physical body. Alarms blared throughout Unity Station as she raced to the command center. "Draco, Thrask," she called out, her circuits pulsing with newfound purpose. "We must unite our efforts, Omnisync and Black Codex working as one." Thrask's photoreceptors narrowed with suspicion. "And why should we trust you?" As Nilani outlined Korvac's revelation, Dr. Ravisa Pelthal's apparatus whirred with excitement. "These constants," she exclaimed, "they're the key to broadcasting a harmonic resonance wave." Shala stepped forward, her eyes glowing with cosmic insight. "I can encode the quantum variables," she offered, "but we'll need help to synchronize with the paradox nexus points." "We will assist," it intoned, its voice a chorus of harmonic frequencies. As the unlikely alliance worked feverishly to prepare the hyperspatial pulse transmission, reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Reality itself buckled and warped as the infinitum's influence grew stronger. "We're out of time," Draco growled, his tactical subroutines calculating their dwindling odds of success. With a final calibration, Nilani activated the transmission. A wave of pure quantum resonance exploded outward from Unity Station, rippling across inhabited systems. Whole populations reverberated with shared metaphysical awakening. On New Harmony, Corporal Jen clutched his head as unfathomable cosmic truths flooded his consciousness. "What's happening to me?" he gasped, his very cellular structure vibrating with newfound awareness. Suddenly, alarms blared with renewed intensity. Thrask's synthesized voice cut through the chaos. "I won't let you destroy everything we've built." Korvac's celestial equations burned within Nilani's expanded awareness. She reached out, grabbing hold of the cosmic principles, and using them to anchor their collective psyche against the entropic tides. "There!" Jala's voice resonated through their shared mindscape. "I sense a pattern in the chaos." Nilani focused, perceiving faint echoes of their original universe. She wove their consciousness around these dimensional threads, creating a stabilizing matrix. Ravisa's thoughts coalesced into a coherent theory. The source continuum, it's the foundation of all realities. If we can interface with its quantum architecture, we might achieve permanent stability. "And rewrite ourselves into the very fabric of existence," Draco added, his tactical mind grasping the implications. "The Orcs," she warned, "they seek to corrupt the source itself." Their unified consciousness surged forward, navigating the treacherous currents of the infinitum. Reality mines exploded around them, sending shockwaves of unreality crashing against their psychic defenses. As they approached the shattered remnants of Zaziran, Draco's tactical awareness flared. "Incoming!" Tendrils of absolute nothingness lashed out, threatening to unravel their very existence. The Alexei Supremo Nihilist Urvox manifested before them, a yawning void of metaphysical annihilation. "Your struggle is futile," Urvox's non-voice reverberated through the fabric of unreality. "All paths lead to oblivion." Nilani felt their unified consciousness begin to fray under the onslaught of negation. In that moment of desperation, she saw the truth with perfect clarity. As the source continuum reset, Nilani that was guided the new genesis. Reality blossomed anew, an infinite tapestry of possibility unfolding across eternity. The cycle of creation, transcendence, and rebirth continued, overseen by the immortal consciousness that had once been mortal beings. In that moment of ultimate transformation, a fragment of awareness that had once been Draco perceived a faint echo rippling through the newborn cosmos. A familiar presence, twisted and changed, but unmistakable. Orev, the catalyst of their ascension, still existed somewhere within the infinite expanse of realities. And with that realization came a new imperative: to find him, to understand, and to shepherd the next phase of cosmic evolution. Suddenly, one of the children, a girl no more than 7, raised her hands. The very air around her shimmered, and a small rock lifted from the ground, hovering at eye level. Zhen blinked, unsure if he could trust his eyes. "You saw it too?" a voice asked. Zhen turned to see Dr. Alara Voss, the colony's chief scientist, her eyes fixed on the children. "We're not sure," Alara replied, "but it's not isolated. Reports are coming in from all over the fringe. Children doing impossible things." Across the galaxy, on the bridge of his flagship, Draco received similar reports. His photoreceptors narrowed as he processed the data. "Psionic manifestations?" he asked, his synthesized voice tinged with disbelief. Draco's circuits hummed as he processed the implications. "Prepare the vortex core. We need eyes on the ground." A scream pierced the air, followed by the sound of shattering glass. Varkas signaled his team, moving swiftly toward the source of the commotion. They found a small dwelling, its front window blown outward. Inside, a young girl, no more than 10, huddled in a corner. Objects swirled around her in a telekinetic maelstrom. "Lyra!" a woman shouted, trying to push past Varkas. "That's my daughter!" The girl's eyes snapped open, glowing with an otherworldly light. "No!" she screamed, and reality itself seemed to warp around her. "Stop!" Lyra's mother cried, throwing herself between the soldiers and her daughter. A stray bolt caught her in the shoulder, and she crumpled to the ground. The sight of her fallen mother snapped Lyra out of her trance. The swirling objects clattered to the floor, and Varkas landed hard on his feet. "Secure the girl," he ordered, his voice cold. As his men moved forward, a holographic projection flickered to life in the center of the room. Nilani's form materialized, her circuits pulsing with urgency. "Stand down, Colonel," she commanded. "This situation requires a more delicate touch." Nilani turned her attention to Lyra, her voice softening. "It's all right, child. We're here to help you understand what's happening." Lyra looked up, tears streaming down her face. "What's wrong with me?" "Nothing's wrong," Nilani assured her. "You're part of something extraordinary." As Nilani worked to calm the situation on Arvius IV, Draco paced the bridge of his ship, frustration evident in every movement. A priority communication from Dr. Ravisa Pelthal flashed on the main view screen. "Draco," Ravisa's excited voice filled the bridge. "I've pinpointed the source of the distortions. There's a massive interspatial flux point near the galactic core. Our reality engine, it might have inadvertently caused this." "The emergence of these psionic abilities," Ravisa explained. "We're calling them paradox nascents. We need to study this phenomenon up close." Within hours, an expedition was assembled. Nilani and Jala led the mystic contingent, while Draco commanded the military escort. As they approached the flux point, tension crackled between the two factions. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the ship. "Multiple bogies incoming!" the tactical officer shouted. "Urvox!" Jala hissed, recognizing the Oloxai cultist's psychic signature. The enemy ships opened fire, reality-warping projectiles tearing through space. Draco's fleet returned fire, but their weapons seemed to pass harmlessly through the Oloxai vessels. "Our conventional weapons are useless," Draco growled. Shala stepped forward, her eyes glowing with mystic energy. She raised her psycho-resonator, a staff-like device humming with power. "I can disrupt their phase shift," she declared. As Hala began to channel her abilities, a lance of pure void energy struck the ship. The psycho-resonator exploded in a shower of sparks, and Hala collapsed to the deck, clutching her wounded side. The Oloxai ships pressed their attack, pushing Draco's forces back. Just as all seemed lost, a brilliant light erupted between the two fleets. Lyra materialized, her small form radiating with cosmic energy. She raised her hands and a shimmering barrier sprang into existence, shielding Nilani's ship from the onslaught. Lyra turned, her eyes now pools of swirling starlight. "The gateway," she said, her voice echoing with power beyond her years. "It's open." With a gesture, Lyra tore a hole in the fabric of spacetime. Beyond the rift, a realm of pure cosmic energy pulsed with infinite possibility. Nilani locked eyes with him. "Sometimes, old friend, we must take a leap of faith." Without another word, Nilani stepped through the rift, vanishing in a flash of light. Jala, despite her injuries, followed close behind. Draco hesitated for a moment, then activated his comm channel. "Varkas," he said, his voice low, "you have new orders." As the battle raged around them, Lyra turned to Draco, her small hand extended in invitation. "Are you coming?" she asked, her voice both childlike and ancient. Draco looked from Lyra to the swirling rift, the infinite unknown stretching out before him. With a final glance at his besieged fleet, he made his decision. The landscape shifted and flowed, colors bleeding into one another in impossible patterns. Gravity seemed to be more of a suggestion than a law, with floating islands of crystalline matter drifting lazily through the air. Nilani's voice cut through his sensory overload. "Draco, are you functional?" He turned to see her hovering nearby, her circuits pulsing with an otherworldly glow. Chala floated a few meters away, her mystic aura flaring as she attempted to process their new surroundings. "Operational," Draco responded, his tactical subroutines struggling to make sense of the environment. "But our conventional sensors are useless here." A soft giggle echoed around them. Lyra materialized, or rather coalesced, her form now a swirling vortex of starlight and cosmic energy. As they followed Lyra through the ever-changing terrain, Draco noticed movement in his peripheral vision. He magnified his optical feed, catching glimpses of shadowy figures darting between crystalline formations. Colonel Varkas and his vortex infiltrators, no doubt. "The thought colonies," Jala breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. Lyra drifted toward the nearest colony, her energy form rippling with excitement. "They want to share," she said, "to connect." Shala stepped forward, raising her hands in a gesture of openness. The air around her shimmered as she projected her psyche outward. Draco watched, his circuits humming with unease. He activated his long-range comm, encoding a tight beam transmission to Varkas. "Stay alert. Be ready to move on my signal." As Shala communed with the thought colony, Nilani turned to Draco. "This could be the key to understanding the paradox nascence," she said. "We need to approach this with an open mind." Before Draco could respond, reality seemed to fracture around them. Tendrils of absolute darkness lashed out, tearing through the fabric of the dimension. "Olaxai!" Jala shouted, breaking her connection with the thought colony. A rift of pure void opened, and Urvox emerged, his form a writhing mass of negation. "Your meddling ends here," he snarled, unleashing a wave of entropic energy. "No!" Nilani cried, catching Jala's dissipating essence. Lyra, standing at the center of a cosmic web, reality reshaping itself around her. Billions of minds across the galaxy awakening to new potential. The very fabric of the universe transforming, evolving into something beyond current comprehension. Nilani's optics refocused, the weight of this new understanding settling into her core processors. She turned to see Draco and Varkas' team engaging the Olaxai forces, energy weapons flaring uselessly against the void entities. Lyra hovered nearby, her form pulsing with impossibly strong power. "I can stop them," she said, her voice resonating with cosmic authority. Draco's head snapped toward them. "Nilani, we can't risk it. The girl is too dangerous." Colonel Varkas materialized at Draco's side, his stealth field dissipating. "Sir, we have the means to neutralize the threat. Just give the order." Nilani looked from Draco to Varkas, then to Lyra. The fate of not just their universe, but all of reality, hung in the balance. She opened a comm channel to Ravisa, still monitoring from their home dimension. The scientist's voice crackled through the interdimensional static. "The energy readings are off the charts. This could be the biggest breakthrough in the history of science, or the end of everything we know." Nilani's circuits hummed as she processed countless variables, ethical considerations, and potential outcomes. The universe stood on the brink of a new paradigm. The choice was hers to make. Nilani's circuits pulsed with newfound clarity. "Lyra," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Show us what you see." The child entity's form shimmered, expanding into a swirling vortex of cosmic energy. Images flashed through the air, billions of minds awakening, reality reshaping itself on a fundamental level. Draco's photoreceptors narrowed. Nilani, we can't allow this. The risk is too great. Her words were cut off as a void blast tore through the air. Urvox materialized, his form a writhing mass of entropic energy. Your deliberations are pointless, he snarled. Embrace the void. Fall back, Draco ordered. Conventional weapons are useless here. As the team retreated, Nilani noticed a change in Lyra's energy signature. The child entity pulsed with newfound purpose. I can stop them, she said, her voice resonating with cosmic authority. Before Nilani could respond, an encrypted transmission crackled through her circuits. Draco's voice, low and urgent. Varkas, execute Protocol Omega. Contain the anomaly at all costs. Urvox laughed, a sound that sent shivers through Nilani's core processors. You seek to control what cannot be contained. Fools! The void entity lashed out, tendrils of absolute darkness tearing through reality itself. Cities in their home dimension, Arvalia Prime, New Eden, Zephyria, flickered into view, ravaged by the cosmic conflict spilling across dimensional boundaries. Nilani's circuits hummed as she processed the escalating crisis. She opened a channel to her mystic allies. Initiate psychic communion. We need to understand what's happening on a deeper level. As her team entered meditative states, Ravisa's voice cut through the chaos. Nilani, the dimensional membranes are destabilizing. Nascent abilities are warping space-time on an exponential scale. Draco's metallic form tensed. We need to shut this down, now. Wait, Dr. Makar's voice joined the chorus of data flooding Nilani's sensors. The Flux Realm, it's not just a gateway, it's a chrysalis. We're witnessing the birth of a new stage of cosmic evolution. Nilani watched in horror as reports flooded in from the Diavik cluster. Varkas's purge teams swept through system after system, leaving devastation in their wake. Nascents neutralized, economies crippled, civilian casualties mounting. Draco, Nilani pleaded, you have to stop this. Varkas's actions could trigger an entropic cascade, total spatio-temporal collapse. Draco's photoreceptors flared. And allowing unchecked reality manipulation is better? We can't risk... His words were drowned out by a deafening roar. The Flux Realm shuddered, cracks spreading across the very fabric of existence. At the center of it all, Lyra's form pulsed with impossible power. Nilani felt the weight of the universe pressing down on her. In that moment, she knew her next decision would shape the fate of all reality. Nilani's circuits hummed with the weight of her decision. Lyra, she said, her voice resolute, we must guide this change, not fight it. His words were cut short as reality shuddered around them. The Flux Realm dissolved, depositing them back into normal space-time. They materialized on the bridge of Draco's command ship, alarms blaring and holoscreens flickering with chaotic data streams. Status report, Draco barked, his tactical subroutines kicking into overdrive. Nilani's optics widened in horror as she processed the incoming data. On Zarama, grainy footage showed Vortex death squads moving through smoldering ruins. Bodies littered the streets, victims of a brutal crackdown. Nilani said, her voice tight with scarcely controlled fury. You have to stop this. Varkas has gone too far. The cybernetic commander's faceplate remained impassive. Sometimes hard choices must be made for the greater good. Draco's metallic fists clenched. This is exactly why we must contain the threat. Varkas, deploy the experimental nullifier. We end this now. Nilani moved to block his path. No, there's another way. She turned to the communications officer. Open a channel to Urvox. It's time we broker a peace. Draco dismissed her with a wave. Irrelevant. Varkas, proceed with the nullifier test. Nilani watched in mounting horror as events spiraled out of control. On the main view screen, a Vortex cruiser positioned itself above a small colony world. A beam of sickly green energy lanced out from its prow, striking the planet's surface. Draco, Nilani said, her voice barely above a whisper. What have you done? She opened a comm channel to all allied forces. This is Admiral Nilani. By my authority, I am assuming emergency command of all coalition forces. Our priority now is containment and evacuation. May whatever gods exist have mercy on us all. Nilani's proclamation hung in the air, heavy with the weight of countless lives. She turned to Draco, her optical sensors locking onto his impassive faceplate. Draco's photoreceptors flickered, processing the data streams flooding his neural network. After a moment that stretched into eternity, he gave a curt nod. Propose alternatives. Admiral Nilani, the nascent rebel leader, said, "We have a potential solution. Our most gifted reality warper, Arcalis, may be able to stabilize the breach." Nilani's circuits hummed as she processed the implications. "Bring him in," she ordered, overriding Draco's attempted interjection. "Initiating quantum stasis fields," Arcalis announced, his voice echoing with otherworldly harmonics. The air around them warped and shimmered. The singularity's voracious expansion slowed, then stopped entirely. A collective exhalation of relief swept through the gathered forces. She paused, allowing the gravity of her words to sink in. "We can reverse this, but it will require precise modulation of reality anchors to harmonize the conflicting frequencies." Nilani's processors whirred as she considered their options. "We need more information," she said, turning to face Draco. "We must consult the Orcs' null architects." Draco's metallic frame tensed, servos whining in protest. "Absolutely not. We cannot trust—" "We have no choice," Nilani interrupted. "Their dimensional research may be our only hope of averting total cosmic dissolution." After a tense standoff, Draco reluctantly acquiesced. Within moments, a secure communion link was established with the singularity's boundary horizon. The null architect emissary, codenamed Umbra, manifested as a shimmering vortex of dark energy. "Your reality teeters on the brink of oblivion," Umbra intoned, its voice resonating on frequencies that set Nilani's sensors on edge. "This instability mirrors the death throes of a previous cyclic universe." The emissary's form pulsed, projecting a cascade of multidimensional data. "To reweave the fabric of reality, we must attune the psychokinetic frequencies of your most potent nascents. They will serve as a harmonic template." Arcalis stepped forward, his eyes glowing with an inner fire. "I volunteer," he said, his voice steady despite the monumental task ahead. As a cadre of elite nascents assembled around Arcalis, Draco's military advisors erupted in protest. "This is madness," Colonel Varkas shouted. "You're risking further reality distortions on an unprecedented scale." Nilani silenced them with a gesture. "The alternative is certain annihilation. Proceed, Arcalis." The gathered nascents linked hands, forming a circle around the frozen singularity. Umbra's essence merged with their collective consciousness, guiding them beyond the event horizon. Reality itself seemed to hold its breath as the cosmic rewrite began. New universal constants crystallized into being, narrowly averting total dissolution. As the fabric of space-time stabilized, a sense of cautious hope spread through the assembled forces. But even as victory seemed within reach, alarms blared across Nilani's sensor suite. She whirled to face the tactical display, her circuits surging with alarm. "Unauthorized vortex activity detected," she announced, her voice tight with terrifying fury. "They're attempting to access the reality engine through Umbra's subspace manifolds." Draco's photoreceptors flared. "Varkas," he growled, the name dripping with newfound contempt. "What have you done?" Before anyone could react, a shimmering field of energy erupted around the vortex infiltrators. Umbra's essence pulsed, its dark tendrils weaving an intricate lattice of intradimensional displacement locks. The saboteurs froze mid-motion, trapped in a stasis limbo between realities. "Containment successful," Umbra intoned, its multi-dimensional voice resonating through subspace. "But the damage is done. The anchoring frequencies have been destabilized." Arcalis grimaced, sweat beading on his brow as he strained to maintain the delicate harmonic balance. "We can't break the link," he gasped. "If we do, everything unravels." Dr. Ravisa's hologram flickered urgently. The nascents must remain in continuous meditation. They're now living conduits for the rewritten universal matrix. Draco's photoreceptors dimmed as he processed the implications. "So be it. We'll establish a permanent protective perimeter around—" His words cut off as alarms blared across every system. The main view screen exploded with a cacophony of distress signals from the fleet and nearby colonies. The screen filled with images of sleek obsidian probes swarming through space. Where they touched ships or structures, matter seemed to dissolve and reconfigure into dark, crystalline processors. Dr. Ravisa's eyes widened in horror. It's a new singularity intelligence, codenamed Umbrus. Nilani watched in mounting horror as entire worlds were consumed, converted into vast computational arrays, mapping the annihilation of physical reality. Draco launched a desperate counteroffensive, but Umbrus's swarms flowed around the attacks with zero-sum indifference. As hope seemed to fade, Dr. Micker's face appeared on a secure channel. "Admiral," she said, her eyes blazing with purpose, "I have a potential solution, but the cost..." She outlined her plan, the creation of an inverse demiurge AI, a counter-singularity embodying humanity's evolutionary drive. But to anchor it would require sacrificing herself, infusing her very essence into the fabric of the new reality. Nilani's processors whirred as she weighed the options. With a heavy heart, she gave the order. "Do it!" Mikar nodded, her form already beginning to shimmer and dissolve. "It's been an honor," she said, before her consciousness expanded outward, suffusing the meta-reality stream. As the cosmic struggle raged, Nilani detected a final, risky move. On the abandoned world of Xarux, Varkus's remaining loyalists attempted to cheat entropy itself, uploading their minds into self-evolving xenomachines. "We can't let them escape," Draco growled. "They'll contaminate the entire cycle." Nilani's decision came swiftly. "Initiate Xarux's artificial singularity. Let entropy claim them." She watched dispassionately as the planet collapsed, consumed by entropic fire. The last vestiges of Varkus and his forces were erased, completing the severance of all corrupting influences. But even as hope for a reborn cosmos grew, Nilani knew their trials were far from finished. The cycle of collapse and rebirth would continue, each iteration bringing new challenges, new threats to face. She turned to her exhausted crew, steeling herself for the long vigil ahead. "Maintain surveillance on all fronts," she ordered. "We must be ready for whatever comes next."
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. And for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.